Hello, and welcome to Counterpoint, a production of the Lion Newspaper and Lyons Township Television. I'm your moderator, Lars Lonnroth. Today, climate change. Who has the greatest capacity to help preserve our planet? And in a time where cries about climate change are so widespread, when it comes to preventing climate change and saving our planet, it's worth asking, what can be done? And most importantly, who can do it? So today, we have three phenomenal writers from the Lion Newspaper down here in the studio to talk about this issue. We have Olivia Janik, the opinions editor at the Lion Newspaper, Nicole Klein, a reporter, and then Isabella Cerise, another reporter at the Lion Newspaper. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So, let's start off. What do you think is the person with the most responsibility to tackle climate change? Do you want to start, Olivia?
Well, when it comes to climate change and any big problem that is at a large scale over our country and our world, I always think that it's the person who caused the problem who should take responsibility to solve it, kind of a you break it, you fix it policy. So in this case, I think that big corporations like Amazon, ExxonMobil, major car companies like General Motors are the ones who should be leading us in how we solve climate change, because not only are their business practices responsible for so much of the carbon emissions. In my research, I found that 71% of carbon emissions can be tracked back to just 100 companies.
Wow. And so, Nicole, how do you feel about this issue? Where do you stand?
I feel that there are so many individuals, and every single day we make so many choices that could either help or harm the environment, that it's really the individual's place to help this problem, because every day we have a choice if we want to use a reusable water bottle or a plastic one. And there's what we eat, who we elect into the government, so many choices that could impact our climate.
Isabella?
I think that it's the government's job to control this, because they regulate everything else that we do, so why shouldn't they regulate things like climate change?
Very interesting. And so I want to go back to you, Nicole. So you kind of argue that these minor changes on a larger scale, if more people do it, if you even do it yourself, can still have a pretty substantial impact on the progression of climate change. So what do you think we individually can do to kind of to slow down climate change and help preserve our planet?
Well, one thing I found in my research was eating less meat. And people, a lot of times when someone says that, get kind of turned off if they don't want to go vegetarian. But on average, Americans are actually eating more meat than is recommended. So you don't even have to go vegetarian if you just cut a quarter, or if you just ate a little bit less meat, and if you just ate the recommended amount and not excess, we could help the environment so much, and it would actually be the equivalent of taking 10 million cars off the road for 1 year if Americans cut just a quarter pound of beef a week from their diets.
And so it's kind of being cognizant of the individual things we do every day and how that kind of affects our environment.
Yes, and going into cars, if we could carpool, walk, bike as much as we could, people know that cars are also bad for the environment, and just our choices, and also how much food we throw away, because food will just go into a landfill and convert into more methane gas. So if we tried to reduce the amount of food we throw away, or if we composted, that would also be able to help the environment.
And so all those things are great things that we can do, but why do you personally think, and from your thinking about this, what do you think makes it so daunting for people to actually kind of take this to heart and actually act on that?
I think it looks so daunting because if one person does it, you don't see the impact right away, so you don't really think you made a difference. It's hard to see that you are helping our environment just by cutting out meat or walking one day. And when it's easier or more convenient to drive, and it's more tiring if you walk, and then you can't really see exactly that you help the environment, it could look daunting that I did this one thing and it still doesn't seem like it got better. But if we all made a collective effort to do these things, we would see a big difference.
So it's kind of like voting, for instance. It may seem like your vote doesn't have any impact, but when 50,000 people think that their vote doesn't have an impact, that actually has
Definitely.
Interesting. So, Isabella, you're kind of coming from the position where the government has an important role to play in fighting climate change. Can you talk about that?
Well, I think that it's really important for the entire country to be united as one. And yes, it's really important to have people do their own part individually. But on a larger scale, people should be more motivated to take care of this problem since it is barreling down on us.
And so, what do you think the government can do? What do you think they should and can do to actually kind of address the issues that are affecting our climate?
I think that they can implement new laws that will restrict people from using harmful energy sources such as fossil fuels, which are releasing a bunch of carbon into the atmosphere, which is messing with our planet. They can also start to support smaller businesses instead of larger corporations and giving money to smaller corporations. That way, the larger companies don't control all the factories.
Interesting. And so that's pretty interesting because one of the things you also talk about that I found pretty interesting was how you feel that the government also has a role to make our society, kind of push our society to adapt to the changes in our climate. How did you kind of get to that position, and walk us through your kind of argument there?
Well, that point that I made was basically showing that, like, yes, the Earth is changing, and not only should we try to prevent it from further damaging the Earth, but also we need to adapt and be able to overcome all of these new challenges. So instead of people building their houses in the same place where there was flooding or fires, where potentially it could happen again, there should be more regulations from the government to control where people are allowed to build their homes. That way everybody is safe and no one will be harmed in a flood or a hurricane.
Fascinating. And so I want to draw you in, Olivia. I know last time I kind of left you on the sidelines when you were here. But so you are kind of coming from the perspective that companies have a large role to play.
Yeah. So another thing that I really believe, one of the reasons I believe that companies should take the lead is because you don't always have the smartest and the brightest people going to work in government because it's government and it's low paying and it's not very lucrative for these brilliant engineers and scientists that graduate top of their class from Stanford or MIT. They're going to the big corporations. And so the really smart people who have created all these innovations in business can also be the ones to create all these innovations in how we drive cars, how we compost and recycle. And I believe that it's those smart people who have driven business to invent new things are also the people who can reverse major corporations' harmful practices when it comes to climate change.
And you mentioned in your introduction that one of the things that you, part of the reason why you have this position is because corporations have, in your view, caused this and have a duty to fix it.
Mm-hmm. And well, it may seem a little naive to believe that corporations won't fix it unless they're held accountable, but I believe in personal responsibility, and also making the world a better place should be a part of these major corporations' policies because they are such a foundation in our lives. Like, we get Amazon packages every day at my house, and my parents both drive to work, even though my mom lives about half a mile from our house. So everything we do in life is impacted by the decisions that these major corporations make, and I think that they owe it to all of their customers to make the right decisions to help us all.
And so what do you think they should do? What options do they have available to them?
Well, one of my biggest things is I believe that we need to go towards cleaner energy and creating places that are carbon neutral. Like, I just did a college tour, and American University has become completely carbon neutral and done everything in their power to limit carbon emissions on their campus. And I believe that not only other universities should take similar actions, but also big company headquarters, like a Google headquarters or even an ExxonMobil headquarters.
And I want to bring you guys all into this conversation. And I want to kind of pose the question of how can these individual interests, the individual, the government, and the corporation, how do you think that they can all work together to kind of bring their each individual abilities together to help fight climate change?
I can start. I think that if corporations are trying to make money and individuals are going to be buying their products, so this works together in a way that if individuals want to boycott a company that is not good for the environment, then if they change their policies, it would be good for both. They're making profits because individuals would shop there more, and it would be good for our environment and corporations doing what you said. I definitely agree with what you said, and it would be like individuals could push them to do that also because they're the ones who are buying their products. So if they make it clear that they want energy efficient products, then corporations could change because they would want to increase their profits. And for the government, it's like the individuals are the ones who are voting these people in. So if individuals make sure that the people who are truly going to represent their beliefs on this issue are in, then they can work together and represent individuals' beliefs and create new legislation like Isabella was talking about.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Olivia and I had a lot of the same points when we were talking about fossil fuels. And I think that the government should be able to go to big corporations and hire their working scientists and engineers and be able to come up with a plan together that will fight climate change.
I agree with both Isabella and Nicole because I think that climate change is a very daunting problem, but it can start with grassroots, small decisions made by people, small businesses becoming more green, and then it can work its way up to the corporations because if the corporations believe that their product will be more marketable, if it's more green, so to say, then they will make that product because business is driven by profit.
And so I think bringing you two into a little bit more of a discourse about this, but the idea of being a conscious and kind of activist consumer, where you put a lot of emphasis on the companies you support aligning to your values.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's one route that people don't necessarily take as much when it comes to fighting climate change that maybe they should?
I do believe that. I think sometimes if you're at a store, you're just going to buy what's on the shelf, even sometimes if it doesn't align with your beliefs. But if people really researched and shopped at the companies or supported the businesses that were energy efficient, then that definitely could push corporations to be more energy efficient and help climate change.
Overall, we're all pretty lazy. Like, we're not gonna, and I mean, I include myself in this. Like, I let my phone die because my phone charger is on the other side of the room and I don't want to get up. But it's remembering that, hey, I should be paying attention to this and reminding people that, hey, this is something that's important to your consumers and this is something that's important to the people that you serve is what really drives the entire nation and the entire planet to come towards a more healthy and green planet.
And I think that that's actually a pretty interesting thing about laziness. And I think you can kind of talk a little bit, Isabella, about the government's role in that. Do you think that the government, when sometimes people will not do something themselves because they're too lazy, or corporations aren't going to do it because there's not really any incentive for them other than kind of looking good to their consumers, do you think that the government could step in and kind of help put the wheels on the cart and kind of get that moving?
I completely agree with that. I think that the government should be the first step in the right direction. I think that the government should be able to make laws or create laws that push corporations to become greener, and therefore the individual will also want to purchase greener goods because they are now available instead of maybe the consumer wanting these green goods and forcing the corporations. It could go the other way. Yeah.
Why do you think they're not doing that? Why do you think that kind of stuff isn't happening in Washington?
I believe, much like a lot of other regulation, there's a lot of backlash that happens, and I believe that there probably wouldn't be enough people to vote for it.
And then that brings you conveniently in with the voting with your values and voting with climate change on the top of the priority. And it seems like you guys are all on the same page that climate change is bad and it's going to have a lot of impacts.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are like that. But why do you think that issues about climate change don't necessarily elevate to the top of people's priorities when it comes to voting in midterm and presidential elections?
Oh,
Or
I'm going to go back to my point that people are lazy. And if you're a hardcore Republican or a hardcore Democrat, you're going to want to vote with your party instead of doing actual research on, oh, this mayoral race candidate wants to make our city greener, but they're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, so I won't vote for them anyways. It's more about, I think when it comes to voting, it's about looking at even the smallest elections, like town dog catcher, and not voting on party lines, but voting on policies when it comes to something like climate change that we can all agree is bad and we need to do something about it.
what I think I'm trying to kind of push the direction towards a little bit is about whether or not, like, we as humans sometimes put the short-term benefits in front of the long-term stability of our nations, of our corporations, and of our planet. And so, like, how do you think do you think that's an issue, kind of underlying thing that's at play when it comes to the voting aspect? And I want you to kind of talk about that, Nicole.
I would say that I would definitely agree with Olivia, and also just there's so many issues that people are campaigning for, like people care about. So sometimes if people care about healthcare or about pensions or something that they care a little more about that would impact them directly very soon, and like you said, short term, then they'll go with the candidate that believes that, even if sometimes it doesn't align with their climate change views.
Interesting. And so, what else are you guys thinking about when it comes to this? When you were writing your articles, what were kind of the things that you were thinking about and that you felt may have not been able to be put into your article, but that you're still kind of thinking is an important thing to add to this really important conversation about climate change and about building a sustainable planet?
I would just say there's so many things that individuals could do that I could not list them all in my article. If you go onto EPA's website or just look it up, there's so many different categories of things you can do. There's lists of advice of what to do just with storing and like trying to not throw away as much food. There's lists on just doing that. And there's just so many different things that individuals could do that I didn't include that are also play a big role. Not as main as the ones I included, but they also play a role.
Isabella, it seemed like you were going to say something. What do you want to add to the
I was going to
conversation?
say that, yes, although there are like 3 different points of view, I think that collaboration is the biggest thing to note, and I wish that I included that in my article when I was writing it. But I think that most importantly, like, everybody should be working together, and I feel like taking it to a larger scale and making sure that everyone is aware of these issues is the biggest importance.
And the awareness thing is kind of interesting because how do you think that we can go about raising that awareness?
I think if we like think back to like war times in a funny way, like propaganda almost in a like when you think about it, would be a really good way to like get people to start thinking like, oh, like this is actually an issue that matters right now. Like, yes, there's like gun control issues, and yes, there's issues with like our president right now, but also like climate change is probably one of the top 3 issues right now. And I think that more like advertisements, maybe more like the smoking epidemic, we could do something like promoting cleaner waters and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So on top of cooperation and working together, I think this is going to sound a little bit dramatic, but climate change isn't going anywhere, and this is the future of our, I'm going to sound really dramatic, but it's the entire planet is at stake. And yes, it seems kind of far away with polar bears like on lone icebergs and all that kind of stuff, but we also see it in like everyday things like unclean drinking water and dirty streets and all that kind of stuff. And I think we need to realize that looking 100 years from now, they'll look back on us and say, why didn't they do anything?
And so, Isabella, I want to ask you this, and then we can kind of get into this as a group a little bit more. like what you were saying there, like this is something that is expected to have a pretty big impact on our lives and the lives of our children. And so when we kind of see all this in action, how does that make you feel? Do you want to start us off?
When we see people not
Not
participating, I think that it's upsetting, but also like I feel guilty at the same time because like I am obviously not participating as much as I could be, and I definitely could be using less like car fuel and stuff like that. So I think that I feel guilty more than anything else because I feel like it does, obviously it starts with what you can do to make the world a better place. So I feel like I should be able to do more.
Yeah. Do you guys feel that same way?
Yeah, like I make my mom drive me the 5 blocks to school
Me too.
when it's under 20 degrees. And I do things every day, and I know people who do things every day that don't help the environment. We throw away our Starbucks cups instead of recycling them and all that kind of stuff. And I think we really need to realize that, like as Nicole made out this point in her article, the small things that we do actually do matter.
Yeah, I definitely agree. After researching even more, there's so much we can do, and I realize there's so much more I can do and everyone can do. And it's just worrying that this is the state of our planet and it could get worse. And we all, like businesses, corporations, government, and individuals, we all just need to work together.
Ultimately, what do you guys want people to realize about dealing with climate change? What's really next for grappling with the solution to this problem that we've seemed to be unable to deal with for a number of years? What do you think is next and people that need to know about?
I think people just need like realization that this is an actual problem that is affecting all of us, and that will affect our future generations. I think that's the biggest impact.
How about you, Olivia?
I think that with some problems, if you don't take action, you're just like, oh, well, at least we're not making it any worse. But with climate change, if we're not taking action, we are making it like at least 10 times worse every day by the choices that we make.
Yeah, and it's not just going to go away. If we ignore it for long enough, it won't just fix itself. Everyone needs to realize that we all need to do something.
Well, hey, thank you guys so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure to talk about the intricacies of this issue with all of you. And if you want to see more of the work we're doing at the Lion Newspaper, you can check out our print issue and also visit us on the web, lionnewspaper.com. That is LION newspaper.com. Thank you all for being here.
Thank
you.